Joe's, Bell Bottoms, and Super Sugar Crisp. We watched the Mickey Mouse Club and Soupy Sales in the afternoons. We waited for the dough to rise in our easy bake ovens, and we battled with our Rock'em Sock'em robots. And when we weren't skimming through the latest edition of Mad Magazine, we were reading about Bob Seger in Rolling Stone. Now, besides covering the memories of growing up in Dearborn, the book goes into great depth of the shows, the music, the styles, the culture that we baby boomers experienced. And it outlines both the contributions afforded by boomers and the general misnomers about us, and there are quite a few. After all, we were the first to grow up with television and fast food. We lived through the golden age of toys and candy, the silver age of comic books, and we were the first to ride our Schwinn Stingray bikes. And while coming of age as a baby boomer was a magical experience in itself, growing up in Dearborn during that time made it even more enchanted. This is what this presentation will cover. Now, serving as the home of Ford Motor, the city of Dearborn had a substantial tax base to draw from. And this allowed Mayor Hubbard and the city council to provide us the facilities and services unheard of in other communities. And added to that were the world famous tourist attractions right in our own backyard: Henry Ford Museum, Greenfield Village, and the Ford Rotunda. So if you're ready to travel back in time, let's climb into our Wayback Machine with Mr. Peabody and Sherman. Some of you may know what I'm talking about. And let's set a course for the Dearborn. Largest building in Ford country, the Ford Road headquarters, also known as the Glass House. This is really the pinnacle landmark of Dearborn. Construction started in September of 1953, and the building was dedicated 3 years later. Now, prior to the Glass House, Ford Central Staff was located in a large complex built in 1928 on the southeast corner of Schaefer Road and Rotunda Drive. And directly across Schaefer Road from the old office was the Ford Rotunda. At one, Rotunda was the fifth most popular attraction in America, for the World's Fair in Chicago in 1933. And afterwards, it was dismantled and rebuilt in Dearborn as a welcoming center for Ford Motor. In 1953, the Rotunda's annual Christmas Fantasy was held for the first time, and nearly 500,000 people visited. The displays included an elaborate Santa's workshop, a life-size nativity scene, and animated characters in the children's stories. The Christmas Fantasy was held for 9 consecutive years at the Rotunda, and I'm certain many of you have fond memories of visiting with your family. Unfortunately, on November 9th, 1962, a fire broke out on the roof as workers were waterproofing the building. And despite efforts from the Dearborn Fire Department, the walls of the Rotunda collapsed within an hour. Fortunately, no one was killed. Now, of course, we can't discuss Dearborn without at least one slide of Greenfield Village and Henry Ford Museum. We're not going to get into the history, the background, just not enough time. But like many of you, I recall class trips and attending special events on the weekends with the family. The Old Car Festival, the Muzzle Loaders Festival, special Christmas events. Boulevard, where the Ford test track is now. The original structure of the inn was completed 90 years ago, and it was the nation's first hotel to have air conditioning. Now, how many of you enjoyed a nice dinner, attended a graduation party, or even a wedding reception here at the inn? We now take our way back machine to the steps of the old City Hall complex in Michigan and Schaefer. Now, we are not going to get into the politics of Dearborn, of former Mayor Hubbard and City Council. That could be a presentation on its own. And as kids growing up back then, we really weren't interested in politics, right? But we did appreciate the recreational facilities by the Dearborn's municipal leaders. For instance, the old Dearborn Youth Center, located on the south side of Michigan, west of Greenfield, this 40,000 square foot facility officially opened in November of 1959. It was strategically located between East and West Dearborn so that kids and families of all areas of the city could enjoy its wide variety of activities. The large dome room was perfect for conferences, banquets, exhibits, not to mention dancing and roller skating. The initial youth center had a snack bar, 16 conference rooms, and a large games area. How many great memories did you make over the years with friends and family there? And really, recreation was a big part of growing up in Dearborn. There were no less than 25 city parks throughout the decades, not to mention acres of woods and the areas to explore around the Rouge River. Of course, Ford Field, Crowley Park, Levigood Park, these were among the largest. And of course, Levigood featured the seashore pool. The seashore was dedicated in 1942, originally boasted of a sandy beach and an Olympic-sized swimming area. It was a popular place to spend summers, and back in July of 1959, the park had a record attendance of 15,000 people during one weekend alone. The sandy beach was eventually replaced, and in 1976, the city added an enhanced pool complex and renovated bathhouse. And the Ford Woods Park and Ice Arena at Ford and Reedfield's another great example. The land was virtually a wilderness before the city crews began working on it in August of 1941. And within just 18 hours, the first playground section of the park was ready for use. Associated with the park is the Dearborn Ice Skating Center, which was formerly known as the Mike Adre Arena. It was built in 1971, and a second rink was added in 96. And of course, the ultimate summer destination for kids in Dearborn and their families was Camp Dearborn, which opened Memorial Day 1948, 73 years ago this month. This photo is from July of 1969. Camp Dearborn was Mayor Hubbard's pet project, and he called it the Citizens Country Club. Of course, it's located in Milford. It covers 626 acres of ponds, lakes, and access to the Huron River, not to mention a half-mile beach, swimming pool, picnic sites, and camping. Now, besides top recreational facilities, Dearborn also continues to offer a first-rate library system. And it started with the Bryant Branch Library, previously known as Mason Branch, which opened in 1924. And it remained the main library until Henry Ford Centennial opened in 1969. Next came the City Branch Library, opened in 1930 on the second floor of the City Hall. And it then moved to various locations in the coming years. It eventually closed in '69 when Henry Ford Centennial made it no longer necessary. The Southeast Branch was a small facility located on Salinas Street off of Miller. It opened in 1941, but it was changed to a reading room back in June of '72. The Esper Branch on Warren Avenue, dedicated in October of 1953, and was originally named the Warren Branch. No surprise there. And of course, one of my favorites, the Snow Branch Library on Telegraph in Princeton. This opened in January 1960 and began with a collection of 6,500 books, but it was a sufficient facility at 12,000 square feet. And unfortunately, it closed in September of 2011. Then came Henry Ford Centennial Library. When this facility opened in November 1969, I was 11 years old, and we kids thought it was the coolest place. You could not help but be impressed by its size and grandeur. The library's original floor plan included large meeting rooms on the first floor, a large children's section, open stacks for magazines, listening booths to play record albums. How many of you remember that? And a number of electric typewriters that were spread along the second floor. Now, utilizing Dearborn's great libraries was important to us kids and teens who were attending the city's numerous schools, whether it was public or parochial. And no matter what high school you graduated from, be it Dearborn High, which is up there left, Fortson High, Etzel Ford, Sacred Heart High on the lower left, St. Alphonsus, or Divine Child, some of us continued our education in Ford country, either at the University of Michigan Dearborn campus, which opened in 1959, or at Henry Ford Community College, which was originally named Fortune Junior College back in 1938 when this opened. It adopted the name of Henry Ford Community in 1952. Now, the current campus at Evergreen and Ford Road was completed and dedicated 10 years later in 1962. I first attended Henry Ford in February of 1977, and I wonder how many of you I passed by in the hallways, the classrooms, and the student center. Now, the same year HFCC campus opened in '62, St. Joseph's Retreat was closed down after operating for the last 80 years. And for those of us too young to remember, St. Joseph's Retreat was a towering, massive Gothic facility that sat back on the northeast corner of Michigan and Outer Drive. And if its monster-like exterior didn't send shivers through you as a kid, with all due respect, the facility's purpose most certainly did. St. Joseph's was Michigan's first private mental institution, which opened in 1882. It subsequently catered mostly to the affluent, and incidentally, the very first telephone ever installed in the city of Dearborn was at the retreat in 1889. Now, here's an old photo prior to '62, looking towards the southeast, and directly across Michigan Avenue from St. Joseph's, St. Joseph's with the yellow arrow, is Retreat Field. Retreat Field is shown in the red triangle. Retreat Field stretched across the south side of Michigan from Outer Drive to Nolan, and the field was eventually sold to a developer. Now, this red triangle, ladies and gentlemen, is the future site of Westbourne Shopping Center, which opened in February of 1959, and we're going to get to Westbourne in a few minutes. A few more historic landmarks we passed by 1,000 times growing up in Dearborn: the Commandant's Quarters, corner of Michigan and Monroe, part of the Dearborn Historical Museum. This was built in early 1830s and remains the oldest building in Dearborn, still on its original site. Kitty corner from the Commandant's Quarters is the Wagner Hotel Complex. In this photo from 1956. It was built in 1896, constructed from bricks in the Wagner Brickyard. It closed in the 1920s and was used for various businesses, including a Dearborn post office and, of course, a branch of Cunningham Drugs, as shown here. 4 blocks west of the Wagner complex is another landmark that stood for 50 years in Dearborn. How many remember the Mercury Motor Inn and its coffee shop? The Mercury opened in February of 1960 with its unforgettable neon retro sign, and the coffee shop featured a great breakfast, other daily specials served from its center counter area that was surrounded by bar stools and small tables. Now, I have to admit that I almost cried when I saw the Mercury torn down, and I don't know about you, but a big part of my childhood went with it. And almost as familiar as a landmark as the Mercury signage on Michigan Avenue were these 30-foot tall structures on Telegraph Road. How many of you remember the Presto Whip cans? These were built in the late 1960s, just south of Michigan Avenue. And it's interesting that they not only served as advertising for White House products, but they were in fact functioning silos. They stored soybean oil and sugar for production at the facility. They were torn down in 1983 when Presto Whip was sold, but boy, sure bring back some great memories. All right, so let's redirect our Wayback Machine and let's focus on the popular retail offered in Dearborn with more attention on local versus national retailers. Located in East Dearborn, the Schaefer Building was one of the first complexes to offer offices and retail space. This was built 91 years ago. 3-story Art Deco monster that takes up an entire city block. When it opened, it was the largest commercial building on Michigan Avenue between Detroit and Chicago. Now, of course, some of the businesses we remember that occupied Schaefer Building included the Bank of Dearborn, Flaming Steaks Restaurant, and SS Kresge's, shown here, which took up most of the interior square footage. Still lacking major shopping center in West Dearborn in the late 1950s, again, we discussed that a developer had purchased Retreat Field and announced plans for new retail, with construction beginning in August of 1957. And of course, we're talking about Westbourne Shopping Center. Westbourne's grand opening was on February 26, 1959, with Kroger's on the far east end and Crowley's on the far west. And in between, the original stores from 1959 are listed here in no particular order. Of course, there were other places like Alexander Pullen Market, Rose Jewelers, Bank of Dearborn, and Hong Kong Restaurant that would open years later. But I bet we could spend an entire hour just talking about Westbourne. Crowley's was a tri-level department store, 200-seat auditorium on its top floor for meetings and fashion shows, and there was a middle escalator that took you downstairs for other items, including luggage and a small records department. Now, for us kids and us teens in the area, this was the store to go to for Mother's Day, Father's Day, and Christmas. And like many of you, I really miss Crowley's. Now, both Kresge's and Sanders had 3 main locations in Dearborn at one time, and the ones in Westbourne had their own lunch counters with specialty items, sandwiches, soups, and cream puffs, just to name a few. And if you recall, the Westbourne Kresge's lunch counter, which is actually shown here, ran along the left side of the store as you walked in. The most important to us kids, their toy department was in the very back and to the right, next to the pet department that featured the little green turtles and goldfish for sale. Westbourne was changed to an enclosed mall in the fall of '74, and Sally's was the last of the original stores to close in Dearborn, in Westbourne, I should say, which was really not that long ago. Now, 17 years after Westbourne opened, a new type of indoor mall was introduced to us in March of 1976, and it was called Fairlane Town Center. Again, we could take the entire hour just talking about Fairlane, because when it opened on March 1st of '76, JCPenney was on its North Anchor department store, Sears was to the south, and Hudson's was on its northeast side. Lord & Taylor was also added in March of 1978. Now, how many of you remember the first time you walked into Fairlane in those early days? The large tiled flooring, the wood trimmed glass railings, the ceilings, the hexagon-shaped skylights, the central water feature. And how many of you spent time at the ice skating rink on the ground floor, or saw Star Wars back in 1977 for the first time in one of their 5 movie screens, which was on the second floor over the skating rink? The ice rink eventually closed in November of '83 and is replaced with another 5-screen movie theater. But for those of us in those early days, an entire day of shopping, entertainment, eating, and people watching could be planned and spent at Fairlane. Now, there are way too many stores to mention that were open one time or another in Fairlane. I'm sure you can recall all your favorites, whether they were national retailers or local, but we will mention a couple of the early eateries that were located inside, like the Tollgate, that's in the upper left corner, the Magic Pan, and Jonathan B. Pub, or even those located outside the parking lot, like Chuck Muir's Big Fish Restaurant and Kyoto's Japanese Steakhouse. And how many times did you ride the old monorail cars that shuttled us back and forth between Fairlane and the incredible Dearborn Hyatt Regency that opened just 2 months earlier? The shuttle could be picked up at Fairlane's mid-level near Hudson's, and this resulted in a 91-second automated ride traveling about 25 miles an hour. The shuttle was subsequently shut down in 1987. And yes, the Hyatt Regency itself spread a whole new meaning, elegance, and innovation to Ford Country, and from its curved facade to the open and towering interior to the effortless gliding elevators. And during that first week it was open, the hotel was visited by 20,000 people a day. I was one of them. Back then, there were 3 restaurants inside the Hyatt. Casual eatery called Cafe's Place on the second level as you get off the shuttle. A higher end restaurant down the hall called La Rotisserie, and sitting on top of the Hyatt was a round revolving restaurant called the Rotunda that rotated once every hour. Dinner, drinks, music were featured nightly with great views of Dearborn stretched out before you. But even without the Schaefer Building, Westbourne Mall, Fairlane Town Center, Dearborn was not without a lack of retail. Not only department stores, but local businesses, clothing, music, home goods, and recreation. In East Dearborn, you had the national retailers like Montgomery Ward and Federals. They were kitty corner from each other at Michigan and Schaefer. You also had a slew of national retailers like Winkleman's, Albert's, and Baker's Shoes. On the way from east to west Dearborn, you would pass Hudson's Budget Store, which is on the southeast corner of Michigan and Greenfield, which opened in 1963. Years later, it was replaced with a Kmart. And traveling further westbound on Michigan Avenue, past Telegraph, you could shop at Spartan Department Store, which was not so much different than Kmart. And of course, the 2 most popular department stores in the past in West Dearborn were Muirhead's and Jacobson's. Now in the 1940s, Apex Auto Service and Gas Station was on the very northeast corner of Michigan and Military. It was owned by a gentleman by the name of John Muirhead. John married Alberta Albertson in 1946, who then created Muirhead's Children's Store, located just to the east of Apex. The store initially carried children's furniture, carriages, toys, and a large collection of dolls. Now this photo, taken in the early 1960s when Apex became a Speedway gas station, you can see it there in the corner, the far right. You can also see Sacred Heart Church and the Mercury Motor Inn. Now John Muirhead eventually closed the station, tore it down, so that Muirhead's department store could be expanded all the way to Military. And here's a photo of Alberta Muirhead years later standing proudly in front of the expanded store. Now the Muirheads themselves lived on the second floor of the building. Back in the early days, many of you recall visiting Muirheads at Christmas time, so you could take Santa's igloo by means of a sleigh ride on rails. And from there, you could have your photo taken with the big guy. What a thrill that was. Now, since the 1940s, Daly Brothers Furniture was also a longtime retailer in Dearborn. They're on the south side of Michigan between Tenney and Howard Street. Now, they eventually closed, and the property was taken over by yet another iconic department store called Jacobson's. The open house for Jacobson's took place on October 6, 1964. They focused on apparel, fine jewelry, and quality home furnishings. and many a Dearborn bride purchased their wedding dress at Jacobson's, not to mention fine china and silverware. The restaurant, located on the second floor, and I remember the name, was called Top of the Fountain. It featured the famous Waldorf salad and cheese soup. Another popular furniture store in Dearborn was the Urich Company on the north side of Michigan between Military and Howard. They were known for their clocks, their furnishings, and their home accessories. And in 1962, Urich's added a general store and an ice cream parlor, complete with an old-fashioned soda fountain and a large penny candy selection: Tootsie Rolls, Candy Dots, Necco wafers, Pixie Sticks, and taffy. How many memories does this bring back to you? What a treat it was to go to Urich's as a kid and buy the candy and the ice cream, walk around the stores. So sad when that place closed. The ice cream parlor in the back of Urich's included a service area with a large dark maple top, rich wood counter, Tiffany overhead lights. All of this dated back to the 1870s. The furniture was actually purchased in Massachusetts and was brought to Dearborn when the parlor opened. Again, there are far too many local clothing and accessory stores of the past to mention them all, but you will recall shopping at stores on Michigan Avenue like Price's Menswear, Ted's of Dearborn, King's Boot Shop, Maternity Mode, and Mary Jane's Bridals. Not to mention Sim's Boys and Menswear, Stewart's Ladies Apparel. You remember Don's Department Store, Telegraph in Oxford, and Mano Clothing further down Michigan, which is still open, by the way, just east of Telegraph. Of course, who can forget Lynch's Costume Shop on Howard Street? This first opened in 1949, offering costumes, stage makeup, and Halloween accessories. Dearborn also boasted of its retail stores, specialty stores. For instance, on Telegraph, the very south end of Dearborn, there was a long-standing Jan's Tropical Fish. And at the north end of Telegraph, at Dearborn's northern border, Harry's Army Surplus, which is also still open. And Jack's Bicycle Shop. You may not know that Jack's was established in Dearborn way back in 1935 on Mason Street, later moving to its current location on Michigan west of Telegraph. Retailers located in the Kelvin Theater Block, Cameo Gowns, Little Professor Book Center, the Silver Bear Gift Shop, and of course, let's not forget Nisco's Bar, previously the Aviation Cafe. Local appliance stores included Radio Frank's in East Dearborn, Walter's Home Appliance on Michigan east of Oakwood, and the ever popular Adre's Appliance at Carlisle and Outer Drive, the sponsor of countless local sports teams. But Dearborn also had its share of music and record stores. Of course, the most popular and most remembered is Dearborn Music, corner of Michigan Monroe, and still open on Michigan Avenue, just west of the Military. How many of you purchased your first Beatles albums, your first Motown album? Now, if you get on Dearborn's music website, it says that they've been open since 1956, but historic city directories show Dearborn Music as far back as 1943, excuse me, on Michigan Avenue between Military and Howard. In East Dearborn during the 1970s and 80s, Peaches Records and Tapes, that was the place to go on Schaefer Road, just north of Michigan. Bought my first, the Fleetwood Mac Rumors album there in 1977. Peaches was probably the largest record and tape store within city limits and even larger than Music Land at Fairlane. Now, of course, if you weren't listening to latest songs in your 8-track player, you could always tune into WKNR Keener 13, started playing top 40 music on Halloween in 1963. The reason we bring up WKNR is because the station was located in Dearborn, south side of Michigan, east of Greenfield, next to the Lamplighter Restaurant. And of course, if you prefer to simply play the music yourself, you could always go to Grinnell's of Dearborn, Anderson Music on Telegraph, or Wonderland Music on Michigan, east of Schaefer Road, selling various musical instruments, sheet music, and lessons. Now, Ford Country has also had its share of long-standing party stores, including Bill's at Michigan and Hague. And if you were too lazy to get out of your car for a six-pack, there's always Pat's Drive-In on Telegraph, south of Ford Road. Just drive through the middle of the building, roll your window down, place your order, hand them your money and your fake ID, and head out to Ford Field or Heinz Drive with your drinking buddies. And after a late night of drinking, Dearborn was blessed with a number of slider joints in every corner of the city. Carter's Hamburgers had several locations at one time. On South Telegraph at Notre Dame, on the northeast corner of Ford and Schaefer, which is lower right-hand corner photo, and on Outer Drive at Southfield, which is still there. In fact, Carter's has been a main fixture in Dearborn since 1948. There is also the famous Powers Hamburger. There's one at Michigan and Oakwood, and there's another one on the far east end of Dearborn at Michigan and Wyoming back in the 40s and the 50s. White Tower Hamburgers opened in 1954 on Michigan Avenue east of Schaefer. And decades later, it became Tammy's Cafe, eventually closing just a few years ago in 2017. And not sure how many of you are going to remember the Sip and Nip Drive-In, located on Telegraph Road, just 2 blocks north of Cherry Hill, from the 1940s and the 1950s. How many of you pulled in here in your 57 Chevy? And of course, we can't forget the fabulous pizza in our Dearborn neighborhoods, including the local bakeries who served slices and pizza rolls. Again, too many to mention them all, but here's a few. Amato's Pizzeria since the 1940s. There were 2 locations. Not sure if they were related. And of course, Angelo's Pizzeria, by far the most popular, most remembered in West Dearborn. Enter from the back, walk through the kitchen to your table. I could not find a photo of Angelo's, and boy, I would love to have one. Capri Italian Bakery opened in 1973, known for the pepperoni rolls. The Sebo House Pizzeria, home of the Little Sebo. Como's Pizzeria in East Dearborn, and on Dino's on Monroe Street, just south of Carlisle, Dino's Pizzeria. Corbino's Pizza, Telegraph between Wilson and Hollander Street, a local favorite. And of course, the favorite, Dearborn Italian Bakery. DIB has been a fixture in Dearborn since 1960. Gerardi's Pizzeria and their Old World Roman restaurant, they were both associated with original Joseph's restaurant on Telegraph back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And of course, there's Liberi's Italian since 1957. Originally on Miller Road, they're now located in Allen Park. Who remembers the great Roma Bakery on Schaefer between Ford Road and Warren? Large selection of pizza and baked goods. And last but not least, Rowan Village, opened in 1964, still serving great pizza and Italian on Dix Avenue, north of Verner Highway. Anyone getting hungry yet? Now, beyond burgers and pizza, Dearborn was known for its great restaurants and diners, especially given the fact that Metro Detroit remains a melting pot of culture and cuisine. Again, too many to name, and unfortunately, most of them are no longer with us. But do you remember Applegate's Prime Beef House, north side of Michigan, west of Schaefer, opened in 1957, known for its steaks and prime rib, but best known for the large black Angus steer mounted on the front exterior of the building. Who remembers Baja's? Northeast corner of Michigan and Telegraph, opened in 1959, known as Michigan's finest dining and cocktail lounge. Baja's closed in 1970, was picked up by Chuck Muir, who turned it into a Sundog about 1972, and then followed by Son of Sundog about 78. It is now an empty lot. On the south side of Michigan, between Telegraph and Outer Drive, where the yellow arrow is pointing, Blazos boasted of the country cousin, the best double-decker hamburger ever. They're also known for the car hop service in the back and their famous strawberry pies. This photo is from 1966, looking eastbound down Michigan Avenue. Now, the orange arrow points at Baja's Lounge at the bottom. The green arrow points at Westbourne, and the red arrow points at the Village Plaza. And if you notice, it is presently under construction at the time. And speaking of the Village Plaza, the Brew and Kangaroo is located inside, offering light lunches, sandwiches, and drinks. And how many of you remember a tiny little Jack in the Box on the same northwest corner of Michigan and Outer Drive in front of the Village Plaza back in the 1970s? Of course, we can't forget the famous Brown's Fish and Chips, east side of Greenfield, north of Hubbard Drive, easily recognizable to its quirky box-like revolving sign out front. Also known for the coconut cream, banana cream, apple, and cherry pies. And whoever took a date to the Chamberton Restaurant, 4-star dining. This was originally on Michigan near Oakman, but moved to West Dearborn, east of Nolan Street, and inside the old Dearborn Holiday Inn complex shown here in November of 1964. The Chamberton offered fine continental cuisine, very elegant. If you made a reservation, they would print your name in a matchbox and leave it on your table as a place setting. The old Chicago Roadhouse, east of Brady, a very trendy, popular restaurant in its day. They're known for the steaks, seafood, and other items cooked from their famous copper pit. Christoph's of Dearborn, they've been around since the 40s. Club Restaurant, elevated Dearborn Townhouse Hotel. Some of you will recall a very handy door upstairs, also located in the townhouse. The side door featured rock music, dancing, and an occasional horn band from Chicago. Great place to go. And who can forget Daily Drive-In, with in-house dining as well as car hop service. The first dailies opened on Beach Daily Road in 1948. They eventually expanded to 19 locations. The one in Dearborn opened on Telegraph north of Oxford in 1957. They were known for their foot-long daily dogs. And how many of you ever ate at Hoppy's German Food on Michigan, just east of Telegraph? Originally Chris Marr's restaurant, it became Hoppy's in 1958, and they served Wiener Schnitzel, red cabbage, sauerkraut for 14 years. It then became Richter's German Chalet in 1972. Of course, the famous Kiernan Steakhouse on Michigan between Monroe and Oakwood. I don't know many people from my era that did not go on Kiernan's on a date. They opened in August of '65, and the Silky's Martini Lounge opened about 10 years later. They had a formal dining room that followed about 1980. And oh my God, Lyle's Sandwich Shop. They are celebrating their 60th anniversary this year. Lyle's is on Michigan, west of Schaefer. Their offerings may be limited, but not the portions. Ham, corned beef, turkey and a Kaiser roll, bean soup or split pea. Please support your local eateries. Let's all meet up at Lyle's after this. What do you say? Now, I had to conduct some research on this place. I lived in Ford Country for 30 years, and I've never heard of Miller's Bar. I understand they have some decent hamburgers or something. I'm not sure. Obviously, I'm joking. Are you kidding me? Miller's opened in 1941. I go every time I'm in town. It was originally a beer and shot joint before the world famous menu was added. The hamburger is a special blend from Alexander and Pullen's Market in Westbourne. Now, they do have other great items on their menu, but the 7-ounce burger is the most famous. And who remembers this famous landmark, recently taken down, located on Michigan between Outer Drive and Nolan? Sign of the Beef Carver, originally opened in 1967 under the name Sign of the Beef Eater, but it changed in '79 due to a lawsuit. There were several of them in Metro Detroit. The Dearborn location was the fourth to last to remain open, and they only closed 3 years ago. Very sad. The Topper Cocktail Lounge, known for its high quality food, drinks, and elegant atmosphere since 1949. Got its name because when you walked in, you were greeted by photographs on the walls of celebrities wearing hats, hence the name. Another popular beef buffet style restaurant was the Westerner, located on Michigan, west of Telegraph. Family style restaurant. Carved beef and its natural juices. What a treat to go with the family when you were a kid. Two other longtime establishments, the Woodworth House, actually a charming old residence, was built in 1868, located on Michigan west of Chase Road. It opened as a restaurant in '53. And still sitting on Wyoming Avenue, south of Michigan, the Wyoming Lunch has been a landmark in Dearborn since 1942, serving a great mix of Greek and American favorites. And finally, who remembers Zubox? Greenfield Road, just north of Ford. Besides being a popular restaurant, there were also a country store, an antique shop, a deli, and a cocktail lounge. When they opened in 1958, they exhibited their largest collection of authentic Tiffany lamps in Wayne County. Now, again, we've only hit the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the restaurants, the diners, the eateries located in Dearborn from our past. But these are the eateries that we never forgot. The ones that we grew up with, the ones our parents treated us to, the ones we hung out with our friends or took a dates to, maybe even the ones that we worked at. Now, of course, you can't have dinner without a movie. And Dearborn had their share of movie theaters in every corner of the city throughout the decades. The Calvin Theater, Michigan, between Howard and Mason. As with other landmarks of the past, we could have taken an entire hour to share our memories of the Calvin. Think of all the movies you saw there, first and second run. The Calvin opened way back in 1927, and in 1980, it would be gutted by two suspicious fires in the space of 2 months. The very last movie ever shown at the Calvin was, drum roll please, anyone know? The Blues Brothers. How many remember the Carmen Theater, Schaefer Road, just north of Ford Road? They opened in June of 1941 and sat 1,500 patrons. And unfortunately, they closed in July of 1974 due to poor attendance. The Circle Theater, Warren Avenue, just west of Miller Road. They opened in 1937, and in '63, they changed the name of the theater to the Camelot, which is what most of us remember it as. And of course, the great Dearborn Theater, southwest corner of Michigan and Telegraph, opened in 1941. This photo is actually from about 1947, 1948. They originally sat 1,500 patrons on a sloped floor. A small screening room called the living room was added in 1969 with seating for only 120 people. The Dearborn was eventually split into an 800-seat auditorium, two of them, in fact, in May of '73. Now, after numerous modifications, name changes, and ownerships, the theater was finally closed in 2006 and later demolished. I actually have an original brick from the Dearborn building that I took right after it was knocked down. It is proudly displayed in my garage. The Westbourne Theater, Nolan and Newman Streets, opened in July of '72. The first movie shown was Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. And finally, Ford, Wyoming Drive-In, opened in 1950. Of course, northwest corner of Ford, Wyoming, still open today. Now, we didn't talk about the Dearborn Drive-In because that was actually located in Dearborn Heights on Ford and Beach Daily, and the old Jolly Roger Drive-In was on Van Born in Taylor. Now, the last of the Dearborn establishments we're going to discuss this evening before we open things up covers another form of entertainment, bowling. The pastime of bowling exploded in popularity in the 1950s, and Dearborn sure had its share of popular alleys. The Dearborn Lanes, Schaefer Road, was connected to the Schaefer Bar. The bushes sitting in front of it. The most bowling. Dearborn would hold their high school tournaments. This was on Schaefer, and I'm not sure when it closed down. The Maples Bowling, Michigan Avenue, west of Military. Now, this photo is from 1946, but the familiar signage could still be seen for decades into the 1980s. Mercury Lanes opened in 1948. It was literally next door to the Schaefer Lanes on Schaefer Road between Warren and Tyron. How many of you bowled at the Pine Tree? West Warren Recreation was also another bowling alley. It was literally across the street from the Pine Tree on Warren Avenue, east of Miller Road. The Oxford Lanes, Telegraph north of Oxford. This was open for 53 years. It closed on New Year's Eve of 2011, and it opened in 1958, the same year as Ford Country's largest ever bowling establishment, the Satellite Bowl, featuring the Orbit Room Lounge. Satellite was on the southwest corner of Michigan and Valley Road, and yes, technically in Dearborn Heights, but worth noting due to its sheer size, 84 lanes. Satellite opened in the fall of '58 and contained, again, a total of 84 lanes with 42 in the front, north side, and 42 in the back, east or south side. Now, I live pretty close to the Satellite, and I can't tell you how many hours in my youth I spent there. How about you? This has been a quick 45 minutes, and that's all, folks. 30 years of great memories in under 50 minutes. And I know that there was so much more that we didn't cover, so many more municipal establishments, retailers, restaurants we grew up with, which brings me to my last point. Please support your local Dearborn businesses. There are a handful of establishments that we covered that are still open. Please, let's do what we can, ensure that they remain open after this COVID mess, and let's keep our Dearborn memories alive. I would like to thank Dan and Dearborn Library System for their interest and their facilitating this event. Great job, guys. Thank you, everyone, so much for your interest and attention. I hope you had a great time traveling down memory lane as much as I had. And there is so much more in the book available on Amazon. Out of 45 reviews so far, it still has a 4.5-star rating out of 5. And if you've enjoyed the memories, please click on the author name, my author name in Amazon. It will direct you to the other books I've written on Dearborn, with more to come. Dearborn's iconic eateries, 160 of the best restaurants in Dearborn and Dearborn Heights, 180 photos, all of the menus, the locations, the history of each. Ultimate Dearborn trivia quiz. How well do you know Ford Country? Dearborn 1946, the most pivotal year in Dearborn's history, fascinating reading. And Dearborn 1970, 50 years ago, when most of us were kids, teens, or young adults. And that is it for me. Let me give you back the screen.
Yep. Okay.
Tired.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Gary. Pardon me. Thank you very much, Christopher. Now, got a question there. Where did you get a lot of your images that you posted in the book?
Google. I mean, I did a lot of research. I like to thank Dearborn Historical Society, the Detroit Historical Society, but just the Googling. I've been collecting these photographs probably for the last 20, 30 years. So it's a large collection. I do have a lot of public domain photos as well. Someone, for some reason, uh, did a review of the Dearborn Baby Boomer book on Amazon and gave it a 1 and said there weren't any photos in it. Well, I don't know what books you're looking at. There's 150 photos in the book. So again, just a large collection. The Dearborn Historical Society, if you ever go down there, they have a huge collection as well.
Oh, getting a lot of people are commenting, great presentation, really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
What got you started?
Well, again, I write the books that I wish I could read. Others have been interested in. When I would chat on Facebook or Google, a lot of people love memories of Dearborn, all the restaurants we talked about, the facilities. Hey, remember this? Do you remember that? So that got me thinking, well, let's see if I can find a book out there. I could not find a book. So I thought, well, I have an interest in it. I have a passion for Dearborn. I had to do a lot of research, countless hours. If anyone ever who has written a book will tell you royalties, unless you're Stephen King or you've written Harry Potter, are next to nothing. So it's really a labor of love in doing these books. So I have a great interest in it.
Oh, I hear you. I hear you. Let's see. Now, got a question. Let me confirm the question here.
No, I'm not going
Are
to
you
dive
a
into the politics of
76
Dearborn.
graduate of Dearborn High School?
I'm sorry?
Are you a 1976 graduate of Dearborn High School?
So long story short, I went to Sacred Heart High School for 11 years. And at the end of our junior year, they closed the high school. I had a chance to graduate that summer. I wish I had, but I didn't. So instead, I decided to work in the daytime, and I attended Dearborn High and Fortson High classes in the evenings. And that's how I ended up graduating. But yeah, 1976.
Okay. Let's see. Got a question about diving into the politics of Dearborn. Are you?
Yeah, we want to make this a
Thinking about
happy
a book about
presentation,
that?
right? We want to make this a positive presentation. I mean, you know, let's keep in mind that, again, with the huge tax base that Mayor Hubbard and the city council was able to draw from, we had all these great recreational facilities and libraries and recreational areas. There is no city without its sin. Obviously, Dearborn has had a dark history to it as well, just like many other cities. I really don't want to get into the politics, but we are way beyond that now, and we are progressing.
Okay.
Thank you.
And yeah, just again, a lot of comments, great presentations. Anybody else out there want to talk about, like Chris said, talk about any restaurants or any hangouts or any places that
We covered a lot, right? And I again apologize for talking so quickly to try to fit everything in, but you know what, if there's any other restaurants, places you used to hang out, a lot of places at the Fairlane, I'm sure. What is your next book? I see a question there. My next book is going to be about Dearborn in I got 2 coming out. One in Dearborn 1958, not just because that's the year I was born, but it was really the golden era of Dearborn. And also I'm going to write a book about cruising telegraph. I've got that in the works. All the great memories, the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, cruising up and down telegraph.
Okay, sounds great. We're looking into adding your books to our collection at the library.
Appreciate that. Here's a couple others, and Dan,
Yeah.
thanks for bringing this up. So this one is called Michigan State Fair Memories. I grew up with the Michigan State Fair, Detroit Fairgrounds. I used to love the rides, the attractions, the groups that would play at the band show. No books on it. So I wrote, it's a huge book, a ton of photos. Again, if you click on my author name in Amazon, it will pull up all of my books. Here's another one. I just did a presentation last month, Channel 50, WKBD, the history of Channel Another great book, the whole history, all the schedules, all the shows, and a ton of photographs. Thanks for the sales plug.
So yeah, that's those are great memories. Means a lot to me also. I used to watch Channel 50 a lot when I was a kid. So anybody else got a comment or question out there?
Or even tell me, because when I come back to Dearborn, probably this summer, what is your favorite restaurant right now? I mean, it may not even be a restaurant we covered, but is there are you related to Taylor Jewelers? No. What that is there a favorite restaurant in Dearborn now that's not necessarily old, but is open now? Anyone have any recommendations? I mean, I'm going to stop at Miller's, obviously. I'm going to stop at Lyle's.
No. Yeah, I don't.
Any decent? We have no. I live in Florida right now. We have no Coney Islands down here. So Lapita. Oh, okay.
Yeah, Lapita.
Thank you. I will check that out. Is it on? I'm assuming it. Well, I'll look it up to find out where it's at. I'm assuming it's somewhere in Michigan Avenue or that general area. Michigan Avenue. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Great. Man, the old Angelos. Oh, all right. Okay. Yeah, if someone has any photo of the old Angelo's Pizzeria in Michigan and Hague, I could not find a photo. My email address is inside of my books. If you have a photo of it, want to send it to me, that'd be great. Oakwood Grill, Oakwood and Southfield. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So anybody else comment or
Anyone want to stump the Dearborn guy? Questions? Here's an interesting fact. I was going to throw it in there. If you remember the old Blazos that was on Michigan Avenue between Telegraph and Outer Drive, sometime, I think it was about 1964, 1965, someone threw a bomb into the front windows of the Blazos. It was early morning, 4:30 in the morning. There was only one guy working there at the time back in the kitchen. No one was hurt, and they managed to open that day for business. But many people believe that it was one of the families that owned one of the big boys in the area, because Blazos had kind of split across from Big Boy. So kind of scary. Elmer's Tap Room and Outer Drive. Okay, I'll look for that as well. By the way, Lyle's is still open, right? Michigan and Schaefer?
I'm not sure. I'll have to
Dearborn
look.
High School, 1969. Very cool. The bookmobiles. Oh, yeah. That was great. Driving around to the different schools. Any other presentations coming up in the future for Dearborn Library? I would love to do more for Dearborn, maybe on some of the other Dearborn books. I do have some other presentations coming up. Next month, I have one on a book I wrote about Detroit in 1920, so 100 years ago, what life was like back then. And back then, there was a pandemic going on. People were walking around with face masks. There was a very controversial presidential election. There was a rioting and uprising in the streets. Not much different than what we experienced last year. So funny how history repeats itself.
Okay. Anybody else have a question?
Youth football league. Yep, absolutely. And again, I recall Adre's Appliance and other retailers sponsored a lot of teams: softball, hockey, football. Adre's is no longer around anymore. I used to be on Carlisle. And again, everyone, if I can stress, please support your local businesses, support your Dearborn businesses. Go out to restaurants when you can. Things are lifting up now. Let's keep these places going.
Okay. Yeah, indeed.
There's Jason. I see Jason. Dearborn Thunderbirds, Lions and the Mustangs, yep. Of course, Fortson, the Trackers, Sacred Heart with the Shamrocks, Dearborn High Falcons.
All right. Anybody else have a comment or question? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Chris, for your presentation. I was amazed about all the stores in different places. I mean, as I say, grew up in Royal Oak, and I never was aware of a lot of the stores that were in Dearborn. So it was very, very informative. I really enjoyed it myself. So
Dearborn,
thank you.
Dearborn, and really that's what made Dearborn a great place, not just being a baby boomer growing up, but growing up in Dearborn was a very special place.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you very much, Chris,
Thank you.
and thank you very much for everyone attending. And please check and have a good evening.